Hare Krishna devotees, I will be summarizing the eighth chapter today, attaining the Supreme. This this is an amazing chapter. It talks about why practicing Krishna consciousness during the course of our lives and why we have to start at an early age and how that can essentially help us remembering Krishna at the time of death. So this chapter is focusing a lot on what happens at the time of death and how one takes a body the next body after leaving the current body. So this chapter starts out like this. So towards the end of the seventh chapter, in the last two verses, Krishna concludes that the pious and intelligent takes his shelter in devotional service, knowing him to be the guiding principle of the Adibhuta, the material manifestation, Adi Daiva, all the demigods, the Yajna, he's the Lord of all sacrifices. He also adds that such persons can remember Krishna even at the time of death. So this chapter starts with Arjuna asking clarifying questions about that conclusion. Arjuna inquires, O Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the Adhyatma? What are the fruitive activities? What is Adibhuta? Who is Adidaiva? Who is Adiyagna, the Lord of Sacrifice? And how does he live in the body of Madhusudana? And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the Prayana Kala, the time of death? Arjuna asks these questions like in the first two verses, but in the purport for these verses, Prabhupada emphasizes on how Arjuna has these doubts, and doubts are something that we should definitely get clarified, because as included in the process of Krishna consciousness, when practicing Krishna consciousness, doubts can at times hinder our faith when they are not clarified at the right time. So similarly, Arjuna has all these doubts and hence addresses the Lord as Madhusudana, wishing to have these demon-like doubts removed from his heart. And I've been hearing about how doubts can be very detrimental to the Krishna conscious process, even recently from many of the devotees in this very congregation. So Arjuna similarly also wants to have these doubts resolved. So then Krishna answers like 6 out of the 7 questions that Arjuna asks in like a couple of verses in 3 and 4. But he dedicates the rest of the entire chapter for the final question about the remembrance of the time of death. Just based on the emphasis that Krishna laid on that particular question, we can understand the importance of that. So yeah, that being the most important question, I'll just briefly go over what Krishna says in the first couple of verses about the first 6 questions. Krishna briefly answers that the Brahman is the indestructible living entity. One thing to note here is that Krishna uses the word aksharam, indestructible, to describe Brahman, and we will later see something being described as ksharam, not aksharam. So the eternal nature of this particular living entity, which is to serve the Lord, is called the Adhyatma. And the karma, or the fruitive activities, are any activities that we do for the development of the material body. And Adibhuta, the material manifestation, is that which is constantly changing by being created and annihilated. And here, in this particular, to describe Adibhuta, Krishna uses the word akshara. I mean, Krishna uses the word akshara before to describe the Brahman, but here he uses the word kshara for the material manifestation, to indicate that it is destructible. That is the temporary nature of this material manifestation, that it is destructible. It is constantly created and annihilated. So, and then Krishna continues to say that he is the Lord of all the demigods, and he gives the description of his universal form that includes all the demigods and their planets. And we have further chapters that elaborately talks about the universal form, the Vishwarupa, and not just the demigods and planets. There are a lot more things. I think and some other devotee will definitely give a very extraordinary description of that particular chapter. And then Krishna says that he himself, who is situated in the hearts of all the living entities as the super soul, is the Lord of all sacrifices, Adi Yajna. So after answering 6 of these questions, like most of the Arjuna questions, Lord answers at length this 7th and the final question, and just starts in this next verse. And this verse is quite often quoted by devotees as well. Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yah prayati samadbhavam yasti nastyatra samsayah. Krishna says, whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. There are a lot of places where Krishna is trying to say, of this there is no doubt, atra samsayaha, many references. And here Krishna is telling Arjuna that whoever leaves the body by remembering him attains his abode. And then, but after saying this, Krishna starts giving a generic principle of how one attains next body after leaving the current body. He says, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tejatyanta kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So, in essence, what Krishna is trying to say is here that our thoughts and the consciousness during our lives accumulate to influence our thoughts and consciousness at the moment of death. And then we cannot simply remember something that we have never thought about, or something where we haven't invested our consciousness and at the time of death. So in that particular way, in that way, our present life creates our next life. And if all the activities that we do in our current life are fruitive activities, that will definitely create a body. And we have already seen, Krishna has already explained that the fruitive activities are activities that create the material body. We will get an according material body in the next life based on the fruitive activities that we continue to do in this life. So in order to attain Krishna, Krishna says, so at the prayana kala, at the time of death, whatever we do throughout this life is tested in sort of way. We cannot just simply remember Krishna. It's really difficult to remember Krishna. There is a lot of bodily disturbance, bodily function failure, so to say, and disturbance of mind. Hence, Krishna is asking Arjuna and indirectly us to practice thinking about him during the course of our life. In the 7th verse, Krishna instructs Arjuna to think of him constantly, even during the course of his prescribed duties. He says, "Ma manusmara yudhyacha," think of me, remember me, and fight. Therefore, Prabhupada explains that if we want to achieve success, the real success at the end of our lives, which is to exit the janma mrityu jara vyadi cycle, the process of remembering Krishna is really essential, and we can do that by incessantly chanting the Maha Mantra or the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And going through the purpose of for these verses, it's very evident that Prabhupada wants to lay a lot of emphasis on chanting of the holy names. I'm not an expert of the entire Bhagavad Gita, but based on my experience that I've seen, these are the places where Prabhupada quotes the entire Maha Mantra continuously in purport after purport for all the verses in that particular area, and that shows how important it is. And after stressing a lot on remembrance this much until now, and in the verse 9, Krishna describes the process of thinking about him. He says one should meditate upon the Supreme Person as the one who knows everything, and he who is the oldest, who is the controller, who is smaller than the smallest, who is the maintainer of everything. who is beyond all material conception, who is inconceivable, and who is always a person. He is a person. He is luminous like sun, and he is transcendental beyond this material nature. And Prabhupada definitely emphasizes the foremost point in this verse is that Krishna is neither impersonal nor some void, and recommends meditating on Krishna. So meditating on Krishna. So then Krishna goes on to talk about how one can meditate on Krishna. And then in verses 10 through 13, Krishna describes the very difficult, arduous Ashtanga Yoga method of meditation on Krishna. This process involves the practice of the Shat Chakra Yoga, the meditation on the six chakras, rising the life force between the eyebrows, fixing the mind on the heart, and detachment from all sense gratification, uttering the sacred syllable Om, and the complete absorption in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this entire process has already been very elaborately explained in the sixth chapter, and we have learned already that it's not practical in this age of Kali. We neither have the favorable situations around us that enable us to take up this practice, nor we do have the lifespan long enough to meditate like that, to go through the eight limbs and reach the final stage. It's often described that this process is a ladder, but whereas bhakti, the pure bhakti, analogy given by acharyas is that it's an elevator. It's directly focused on meditation on Krishna. It starts at the point where we focus on meditating on Krishna. So that's really amazing, I find. And after describing the yoga misra bhakti, where there is a tinge of Ashtanga yoga practices in this, in the next verse, Krishna concludes that he is really easily attained by one who's unflinchingly devoted to him, the Kevala Bhakti. And the purport Prabhupada stresses on few important words like Ananya Cheta means undeviating with no desire for heavenly pleasure or liberation. And Satatam and Nityasaha means always with no break, without consideration of time and place, spontaneously. Krishna is pleased with such a devotee and with such a devotee with such an attitude, and gives sufficient intelligence and removes all obstacles from such a devotee's path back to Godhead. And Krishna himself says in the 10th chapter, Dadami Buddhiyogam Tam Yena Mam Upyanti in 10.10. And in the next couple of verses, Krishna says that bhakti yogis, or the devotees who attain him in the spiritual world, will never return to the material world, which is the material world is temporary and full of miseries. And Krishna further goes on to stress that all the planets in this material world are places of misery, to make sure that we're not really bewildered by a desire to go to heavenly or some celestial planets where we can find joy and peace, eternal peace. So that's not really true. So Krishna places a lot of emphasis that all the planets in the material world are places of misery. And here Krishna is instructing Arjuna and in ways indirectly us to board the train back to Godhead. And it is quite natural for us to sort of know more about the destination. So Krishna compares this material world here and the spiritual world, and gives a little glimpse of the glories of the supreme abode in the next few verses. So Krishna describes that this material world is a place of birth, old age, disease, and death. He says again and again, when Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they are helplessly annihilated. Krishna keeps stressing in this chapter that this material world is temporary and is constantly subjected to creation and annihilation. Yet Krishna says that beyond this material world, there is a transcendental world, which is beyond these periodic manifestations and annihilations. That is the Krishna's eternal and the supreme abode, upon attaining which one never returns to this material world. And Krishna reiterates that he and the Krishna Loka are attainable by unalloyed devotional service, Ananya Bhakti. And then in the next 5 verses, that is verse 23 through 27, Krishna describes how different kinds of yogis leave their bodies at particular auspicious moments to attain elevation to celestial planets or even liberation. However, the Bhakti yogi, or the devotee, is very confident in Krishna's protection and is constantly fixed on his unalloyed devotional service. Ananya Haitati Bhakti is his own goal, his only goal. So, as conclusion of this chapter, Krishna towards the end in the last verse says, Vedeshu yajneshu tapashu chaiva daneshu yat punya phalam pradishtam atyeti tat sarvam idam viditva yogi param sthanam upaiti chadyam. He declares that his devotee, the Bhakti yogi, is not bereft of the results of other systems of spiritual advancement. And at the time of death, he returns to Krishna in the transcendental abode. And I just want to sort of read the conclusion that Prabhupada mentions in the purport. I'm just trying to quote it verbatim. The beauty of Krishna consciousness is that by one stroke, by engaging in devotional service, we can surpass all the rituals of the different orders of life. We should try to understand this not by scholarship or mental speculation, but by hearing about Krishna in association with devotees. For no one else perfectly understands the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada calls this development of love guarded by this process, by being fixed in such a study with devotee association, the highest perfection of life, and that it enables us devotees to be transferred to the large abode in the spiritual sky, where we become eternally happy. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Thanks so much, Ajay Prabhu, for beautifully reciting to. So let's just to remind everyone, please stick to the 20-minute time limit we have been given, so that we can complete all the summarization on time. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Please go ahead, man. You have till 10:40. You can go ahead.
Hare Krishna, everybody. I would like to mention that the understanding of this chapter and the summary of this chapter has been prepared in aid with lectures from Headji Chaitanya Charan Das Prabhu, Headji Parama Karuna Das Prabhu, and Headji Damodar Alida Das Si Mataji. Our Dandavat Pranam to these scholars. Chapter 9 is the heart of Bhakti section. The first 6 chapters talk about the progression from karma to Bhakti Yoga, and the last 6 chapters from Jnana to Bhakti Yoga. The middle 6 chapters focus on Bhakti itself. In chapter 7, Krishna introduced us to Bhakti 7.1, 7.14, 7.30. In chapter 8, there was a comparison of Bhakti Yoga with Ashtanga Yoga. In chapter 8, Lord Krishna also said that Bhakti is easy to attain. Chapter 8 concluded by the practice of Bhakti or devotion in 8.28. One attains a result derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities, and also reaches the supreme eternal abode. In this chapter, there are no questions from Arjuna, and Lord Krishna, out of ecstasy of his heart, elaborates and glorifies the process of bhakti. Chapter 9 is called the most confidential knowledge, or Raja Gurya. Lord Krishna, in order to encourage Arjuna to higher and higher elevation in his potent service, describes in this chapter matters that are more confidential than he has already disclosed. Summary of verses from chapter 9.1 to 9.3. The Lord talks about developing bhakti by knowledge about him. The Lord says to Arjuna, this most confidential knowledge can relieve one from miseries of material existence. Discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, then he will surely make advancement towards spiritual realization. Srila Prabhupada notes the word anasuyave as significant. If one is envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even if they are highly scholarly, they can't explain Bhagavad Gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna, making their commentaries inaccurate and useless. Such commentaries should be carefully avoided by devotees. One can perceive direct results by the execution of devotional service, in chanting the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama, Hare Hare. Without offenses, one feels some transcendental pleasure and very quickly becomes purified of all material contamination. The faithless can't accomplish the process of devotional service. Krishna consciousness is the faith by which one gives up all other engagements and adopts to the service of the Supreme Lord, Lord Krishna. Srila Prabhupada explains there are three divisions of Krishna conscious men. The third class are those who have no faith and thus can't attain the highest stage. The second class are those who are not very advanced in understanding the devotional scriptures, but who have firm faith that Krishna Bhakti is the best course and have taken it up. The first class consciousness is one when one is well versed in the literature of devotional service and has firm faith. Thus, faith is very important in the discharge of devotional service. Lord Krishna begins a summary of verses from chapter 9.4 to 9.10. Krishna's inconceivable relationship with the material world. Lord Krishna begins by saying, in his unmanifested form, the entire universe is pervaded. All beings are Krishna, but he is not in them. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is not perceivable through material senses. He is revealed to one who is engaged in pure devotional service under proper guidance. The Lord says that everything is resting on him. Matstani Sarva Bhutani. The planetary systems are floating in space, and this space is the energy of the Supreme Lord. But he is different from space. He is differently situated. This is the inconceivable opulence of the Lord. For ordinary person, it is almost inconceivable how huge the material creation is resting. The Lord is giving an example to help us understand this. For us, the sky is the biggest manifestation we can conceive. In the sky, the wind or the air is the biggest manifestation. Although the wind is great, it is still situated in the limits of the sky. All the wonderful cosmic manifestation are existing by the supreme will of the God, and all are subordinate to that supreme will. The very wonderful and the great material manifestation is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The creation, maintenance, and annihilation of this material cosmic manifestation are completely dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Brahma lives for 100 years. One day of Brahma is 1.3 billion earthly years, and the night is also of the same duration. After the end of the millennium, when Brahma dies, the energy manifested by the Supreme Lord is again wound up in himself. When there is a need to manifest the cosmic world, this is done by his will only, and the entire cosmic manifestation takes place again. The material world is a manifestation of the inferior energy of Lord Krishna, and it is manifested again and again under his will, and under his will, it is annihilated at the end. Lord's first Purusha incarnation, Mahavishnu, enters the creation. He lies within the causal ocean and breathes out innumerable universes. And into each universe, the Lord enters as Garbhadakshayi Vishnu. Each universe is created this way. He further manifests himself and enters into everything, even into the minute atom, as Kshirodakshayi Vishnu. Living entities take different positions as a result of their past deeds into this material world when impregnated. The activities of the living beings began from the very moment of the creation and thus are not at all evolved. Men, animals, beasts, birds, everything is simultaneously created per the desires the living entities had at the last annihilation are again manifested. All this is done by his will. This is the inconceivable potency of Lord Krishna. Hari Bol. After creating different species of life, he has no connection with them. The creation takes place to accommodate the inclinations of various living entities, and so the Lord does not become involved with it. The Lord is not attached to the creation and the annihilation of this material world and is neutral. Living entities take their different forms in various species of life according to their past deeds, and the Lord does not interfere with them. The Lord is always involved in his eternal blissful spiritual activities, but he's nothing to do with these material activities. This material nature, which is one of Lord's energy, is working under his direction. Under his rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. Summary of verses 9.11 to 9.19. Those who understand Krishna in many ways. Lord Krishna, who conducts the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of complete cosmic manifestations, can't be a human being. There are many foolish men who consider Krishna to be merely a powerful man and nothing more. As confirmed in Brahma Samhita, the Supreme Lord Krishna is Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. Krishna is the supreme controller both in the material and the spiritual world. His body is non-material, eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. There are many devotees who assume themselves to be Krishna consciousness, but at heart do not accept the Lord Krishna as the absolute truth. Another set are those who are engaged in fruitive pious activities. These two sects, going back to Godhead, will never be tasted. Having complete faith and performing bhakti with complete surrender and devotion by accepting Lord Krishna to be the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is very critical for Krishna consciousness. Summary, the great souls or the Mahatma fully engaged in devotional service and know Lord Krishna as original and inexhaustible. Mahatmas or pure devotees are not even attracted by Krishna's other features such as four-armed Mahavishnu. They are simply attracted to the two-armed form of Krishna. They are not concerned with any other form of demigod or of a human being. They meditate only upon Krishna in Krishna consciousness. The great soul develops through association with other Mahatmas, pure devotees. Symptom of Mahatma is described as one who is always engaged in chanting the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, engaged in the glorification of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada goes on, how does one glorify the Supreme Lord? By praising his holy name, his eternal form, transcendental qualities, his uncommon pastimes. This is how a Mahatma is attached to Lord Krishna, by hearing and chanting and remembering Krishna. To achieve that success, he engages all activities, mental, bodily, and vocal, everything in the service of the Supreme Lord. Mahatmas do not know anything other than Krishna and are in pure Krishna consciousness. Krishna is Mahayagna. Krishna is the sacrifice performed to please the Pitralokas. The mantras chanted during these sacrifices are also Krishna. The offering of the sacrifices, commodities made with milk, is also Krishna. The fire is also Krishna. Thus, the Vedic sacrifices are in total Krishna. Those who are considered rendering devotional services unto Krishna are understood to have performed all the sacrifices recommended in the Vedas. All the different relationships manifested as Krishna's marginal energy are parts and parcels of Krishna. Our father, our mother, grandfather, creator, etc., all living entities being part and parcel of Krishna are Krishna. Krishna is the object of knowledge, the subject matter which helps us purify our constitutional position. Pranava mantra, Om, is also Krishna. The four Vedas, Sama, Yajur, Rig, Atharva, is also Krishna. Gati means the destination where we want to go. By rigid performances, one may reach planets created by Krishna, such as Chandraloka, Suryaloka, Indraloka, and so on, which serve only as a step forward for the realization of Krishna. One can approach Krishna directly. Krishna, being situated in everyone's heart, is the supreme witness. The residences, countries, or planets on which we live are also Krishna. Krishna is the ultimate goal of shelter. One should take shelter of Krishna either for protection or for annihilation for his distress. Krishna is the source of our generation. No one can be better friend than Krishna, nor can anyone be better well-wisher. Krishna is the original source of creation, the ultimate rest of annihilation. Krishna is therefore the eternal causes of all causes. Hari Bol. Krishna is different. Krishna, in his different energies, diffuses heat and light through electricity and the sun. Krishna is both the matter and the spirit. The gigantic universal form comprising all material manifestations is also Krishna. Summary of verses 9.20 to 9.28. Kevala Bhakti, that is only Bhakti, is far superior to demigods worship. Devotional service begins with chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and side by side trying to understand Krishna is the ultimate, is the absolute truth. Those who are simply official students of the Vedas worship the demigods. Since they worship the Lord indirectly, they are purified of the sinful reactions and are certainly purified of the contaminations of the lower qualities of nature, and are elevated to the higher planetary systems or heavenly planets. Situated on the higher planets, one can satisfy his senses hundreds of thousands of times better than on this planet. When the results of their pious activities are exhausted, one will again return to this mortal planet. Thus, those who adhere to the principles of the three Vedas achieve only repeated birth and death. A pure Krishna conscious devotee offers devotional service to the Lord by hearing, chanting, remembering, worshipping, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, and fully surrendering to the Lord makes a devotee self-realized. His only desire, that is the self-realized only desire, is to achieve the association of the Lord Krishna. Such a devotee approaches the Lord without difficulty. Such a devotee is under the protection of the Lord. The Lord helps the devotee to achieve Krishna consciousness, and when he becomes fully Krishna consciousness, the Lord protects him from falling down to a miserable conditioned life. The Lord continues, persons who are engaged in the worship of the demigods are not very intelligent. Although such worship is offered to Lord Krishna indirectly, but it is the wrong way of worshipping the Supreme Lord. Yajna means Vishnu. Many types of yajna performances recommended in the Vedic literature are to satisfy the Supreme Lord Krishna. He is the enjoyer of all sacrifices because he is the Supreme Master. Less intelligent people, without knowing this fact, worship the demigods and they fall back down to the material existence and do not achieve the desired goal of life, that is, going back to Godhead. 9.25 is important. Fruitive action portions of the Vedas recommend specific worship of the demigods situated on different heavenly planets. One can attain the desired destination by following specific Vedic principles. Similarly, one can attain Pitru planets by performing specific sacrifice. One can even go to the ghostly planets and become a Yaksha, Rakshasa, or Pichacha. Similarly, a pure devotee who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead achieves the planets of Vaikuntha and Krishna Loka without a doubt. Many people have no information of these sublime planets where Krishna and Vishnu live, and they fall down. Even the impersonalists fall down from the Brahma Jyoti. Srila Prabhupada says, the Krishna conscious movement is therefore the distributing sublime information to the entire human society, to the effect that by simply chanting Hare Krishna mantra, one can become perfect in this life and go back home, go back to Godhead. Hari Bol. The process of achieving permanent blissful abode of eternal happiness is very easy and can be attempted by all, even by the poorest of the poor, without any kind of qualification. The only qualification required in this connection is to be a pure devotee of the Lord, as the Lord accepts a leaf, flower, or water offered to him with pure love and pure devotion. Whatever one does, do it with Krishna in the center and offer it to Krishna to attain the perfection in life. Mold life in such a way that one will not forget Krishna. Krishna recommends that one should work for him. Eat remnants of food offered to Krishna first. Offer charities to Krishna. Meditate on Krishna. These are the several ways one can be attached to Krishna in mundane activities of life. One who acts in Krishna consciousness under superior direction is called Yukta. Sri Rupa Goswami explains this further, as says that as long as we are in this material world, we have to act. When actions are performed and fruits are given to Krishna, then that is called Yukta Vairagya. For such activities, clear the mirror of the mind, and as one gradually makes progress in spiritual realization, he becomes completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is free from the bondage of work and its result. One will be liberated and can go back home, back to Godhead. Summary of verses 9.29 to 9.34. Kevala Bhakti elevates even the fallen. In material world, a man may be very charitably disposed, yet he has a special interest in his own children. The Lord claims that every living entity, in whatever form, is his son. So he provides everyone with generous supply of necessities of life. He envies no one, nor is partial to anyone. The Lord's mercy or reciprocation is unimaginable to ordinary consciousness. To those who surrenders unto him with devotion and love, he proportionately takes care of him. He is in the Lord. The Lord is also a friend to him. Krishna only looks for our love and devotion. His mercy is endless. Lord Krishna is positioning bhakti as the topmost situation for those who are engaged and determined in the process of chanting Hare Krishna mantra. In such a situation, even if one accidentally falls down, he should be considered to be in transcendental position. This is the greatest empathy of the Lord towards devotees. Srila Prabhupada elaborates this further beautifully. Because of an accidental fall down, a devotee should not be derided. He should still be considered saintly. If one does not follow this rule and derides a devotee for his accidental fall down, then one is disobeying the order of the Supreme Lord. Hari Bol. A pure devotee is engaged in devotional activities is in the process of cleansing all material contamination from the heart. He puts the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart, and all sinful contaminations are naturally washed away due to his remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly. The chanting of Maha Mantra should never be stopped, as this will protect the devotee from all accidental fall downs, and he will be free from all material contaminations. Anybody can attain the supreme destination without distinction between the lower and higher classes of people. This world is anitya asukam lokam, meaning temporary and full of miseries, not habitable for any sane gentleman, as declared by the Lord. Devotional service of the Supreme Lord is the only process by which all problems of all classes of men can be solved. Everyone should therefore take Krishna consciousness and make his life perfect. Hari Bol. In the last verse of chapter 9, the Supreme Lord Krishna has clearly stated that Krishna consciousness is the only means of being delivered by always thinking about Krishna, by becoming a devotee, by offering obeisances, and by worshipping the Lord Krishna. By worshipping Lord Krishna, one can definitely go back home to Godhead. Lord Krishna is giving all of us the knowledge of attaining the ultimate goal of life. Worship of demigods is most unintelligent, can't achieve the supreme award. Devotee, although may fall from the standard, but still should be considered supreme to all other philosophers and yogis. One who engages in Krishna consciousness should be understood to be perfectly saintly person. Pure devotees has no actual chance to fall down. Why? The Supreme Personality of Godhead is taking care of his pure devotees. Intelligent people, rather everybody, should take that directly to the process of Krishna consciousness and happily live in this material world. He will eventually receive the supreme award of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Harinama Sankirtan ki jai, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Megha, for the wonderful, wonderful summarization. For sticking to the time as well. Okay, now we have Viril Prabhu, who we had at 11 a.m. Prabhu. We can start, Prabhu.
Sure. Hare Krishna. I want to share my screen. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We just heard from Megha Mataji about chapter 9, the most confidential knowledge. There is connection between chapter 9 and chapter 10, and Krishna ends 9th chapter with an imperative to fix mind on Krishna. 9.34 says, Man mana mad bhakta, which is like one should be a pure devotee of the Lord. And therefore, chapter 10 describes the Lord's opulence on which a devotee can fix his mind and how to remember him when we see opulent, powerful, and beautiful things in the world. Now, chapter 10 will help us increase our devotion by hearing more about Krishna's opulences. The chapter can be mainly classified into 4 sections, verse 1 to 7, knowing that Krishna is unknowable and source of all. And again, there are few subsections between 1 to 3. Krishna is the mysterious origin of everything, and one who knows Krishna is free from all sins. And 4 to 7 explains Krishna is the origin of all qualities and personalities. Accepting his powers leads to surrendering onto him. And verse 8 to 11, the famous Chatur Shloki, the pure bhakti is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. And 12 to 18, Arjuna accepts Krishna's position and requests to hear more of his opulences. And the last section is the opulences, where Krishna explains the most prominent among his limitless and all-pervading opulences. Now, the first section, the first verse of 10th chapter, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bhuya Eva Mahabaho Shrunu Me Paramam Vacha Yatte Ham Priyamanaya Vakshyami Hitakamyaya. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, listen again, O mighty Arjuna, because you are my dear friend. For your benefit, I shall speak to you further, giving knowledge that is better than what I've already explained. Here, the word Bhagavan means one who is full in 6 opulences, who has full strength, full fame, wealth, knowledge, beauty, and renunciation. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, Krishna is instructing Arjuna in more confidential knowledge of his opulences and his work, more about his manifestations and opulences. In verse 2, I'm going to read the translation here. Neither the hosts of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulences. For in every aspect, I'm the source of the demigods and sages. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord. No one is greater than him. He is the cause of all causes. Even the great demigods are not able to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We can understand Krishna, who is eternal bliss and knowledge, simply by studying Vedic scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Only the devotees who are fully surrendered onto the Supreme Lord can understand by the grace of the Supreme Personality that he is Krishna. And the third verse from chapter 10 is, I want to read this verse as well. Yomam ajam anadim cha veti loka maheshwaram asam muda sa matyeshu sarva papai pramuchate. Here I specifically bolded the certain words like ajam, unborn, the Lord is unborn. Anadim, like he's the beginningless. Veti loka maheshwaram means the Supreme Lord of all the planets, because he was existing before the creation and is different from his creation. And Krishna is different from the great demigods like Brahma, Shiva, and because he's the creator of Brahma, Shiva, and all other demigods, he's the supreme of all planets. And Srila Prabhupada gave a detailed explanation about Lord Krishna here, because Krishna is known as the son of Devaki. Then how can he be unborn? This was also explained in Srimad Bhagavatam as well. When he appeared before Devaki and Vasudeva, he was not born as an ordinary child. He appeared in his original form, and then he transformed himself into an ordinary child. Here, we need to mention about the word transcendental. Anything done under the direction of Krishna is transcendental. It cannot be contaminated by material reactions, which may be auspicious and inauspicious. And here, in general, like in the material world, there is a conception that there are things which are auspicious and inauspicious, and there is nothing auspicious in the material world. Everything is inauspicious because the very material nature is inauspicious. We simply imagine it to be auspicious. Real auspiciousness depends upon the activities in Krishna consciousness in full devotion and service. If at all our activities to be auspicious, then we should work under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Such directions are given in authoritative scriptures as Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, or from a bona fide spiritual master, because spiritual master is the representative of the Supreme Lord. And Srila Prabhupada also gave a detailed explanation about the sannyasi or a yogi, this transcendental attitude of the devotee in the performance of activities is that of renunciation, and that is called sannyasa. And one who acts as a matter of duty because he has been ordered to do by the Supreme Lord, one who does not seek shelter in the fruits of activities. And that is about the sannyasi. And here in this verse, like verse 4 and 5, Krishna specifically mentioned about the qualities, and he's the origin of all qualities. Like different qualities, be they good or bad, are all created by Krishna. Nothing can manifest in material world which is not in Krishna. For one who wants to advance in Krishna consciousness, and by devotional service, one can automatically develop all these good qualities. And I'm going to read all this 16 and give some detailed explanation or some brief explanation about each of this. Intelligence, the power to analyze things in their proper perspective. Knowledge, knowing the distinction between matter and spirit. And freedom from doubt and delusion can be achieved when one acts without hesitation based on understanding transcendental philosophy, which is asammoha. Tolerance and forgiveness, kshama. Excuse the minor offenses of others, and one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. Next is truthfulness, facts presented as they are for the benefit of others, not distort truth for some personal benefit. And control of senses, senses should not be used for unnecessary personal enjoyment. Control of the mind, restrain the mind from unnecessary thoughts. And the happiness and distress, the sukham, bhava, birth, fear and fearlessness, non-violence, which is ahimsa, not to do anything which would put others in misery, confusion, and all distress. Equanimity, the samatha, freedom from attachment or aversion. Satisfaction, not to be eager to gather more and more material things by unnecessary activity. Satisfaction. Yeah. Austerity and penance, which is tapas, voluntary accepting of hardship or suffering for a higher purpose, example, fasting on unrecommended days. And charity, give 50% of income to Krishna consciousness, or supporting a cause for Krishna consciousness, or to brahmanas and sannyasas. And a man is famous only when he is known as a great devotee. That is from qualities mentioned in verse 4 and 5. And now the Chatur Shloki, verse 8 to 11, which talks about the essence of a pure devotee. And verse 8 summarizes his opulences and the result of truly knowing his opulences. One becomes a pure devotee. One can understand the truth about Krishna only by hearing from Shastra or through bona fide authorities. Krishna is the source of all for both spiritual and material worlds. Lord Krishna is the source of everything. Those who understand this become his devotees and fix their minds and hearts in him. And verse 9 explains about the characteristics of a pure devotee, or in fact, symptoms of a pure devotee. And Srila Prabhupada quotes a very good example from Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya likens transcendental service to the sowing of a seed in the heart of the living entity. The devotional service is just like a seed, and it is sown in the heart of a living entity. And if he goes on hearing and chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This holy mantra, that seed fructifies just as the seed of a true fructifies with regular watering. The spiritual plant of devotional service gradually grows and grows until it penetrates the covering of the material universe and enters into the Brahma Jyotir effulgence in the spiritual sky. And here In this verse 9, and I would like to specifically mention about the word tushyanticha ramanticha, which is satisfied and pleasured. And there are three most powerful devotional services, like Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, hearing, chanting, and remembering. And next two verses from the Chatur Shloki are the verse 10 and 11, which is verse 10 is mentioning about, to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And verse 11 talks about, to show them special mercy, I dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. The only qualification is that one carry out devotional service in full Krishna consciousness. The ultimate goal here is Vishnu can be attained only by this chant and by devotional service, and not by any kind of mental speculation or argument. Now, the third section, Arjuna accepts Krishna's position and requests to hear more of his opulence. Now, we have seen in the 8th chapter, like in 8.2, Arjuna speaks for the last time, and now again, Arjuna wants to hear, Arjuna requests Krishna to hear more of his opulences. Arjuna accepts Lord Krishna as the supreme Godhead in full faith, and great sages have confirmed it. And Srila Prabhupada's purport mentions a couple of Vedic scriptures, Kena Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, and with all these Vedas accepts Krishna as the purest of pure. And now Arjuna prays to Krishna to know more of his glories, so he can think of him and remember him. And Arjuna is not only asking for him, he is asking for the sake of commonly people, and especially for the impersonalists who are in particular concerned themselves with the all-pervading nature of the Supreme. And for the sake of materialists, how a materialist is absorbed in physical things can see Krishna manifested by physical representations, and to taste the nectar. And hearing more and more, we get a chance to taste the nectar, and one is never satiated by hearing about Krishna. Now, the Krishna's opulences, there are limitless opulences from Krishna, out of which, and we all know that there are unlimited, out of which Krishna quotes the most prominent one. Here, the 82 most prominent 82 opulences were quoted in this chapter. And ultimately, it is not possible to comprehend the greatness by our limited senses. Krishna is the beginning, middle, and end of all beings. Krishna manifests as three Purusha avatars in the material creation: Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. Mahavishnu, or Karanodakshaya Vishnu, is the cause of all causes, and Krishna is the beginning, middle, and end of all energy. Krishna's opulence is visible through manifestations of his energies in the world. Krishna presents his glories, he presents a group within the world, and then shows how he is the prominent aspect. Now, from verse 19 to 42, there are various opulences mentioned by Krishna, split across multiple verses. Here we can see a classification of various opulences. Here, out of this group, I'm this. Like Krishna is going to explain and how prominent among the different groups. Like when we talk about demigods, first one is the Indra. Indra is the chief of demigod of the heavenly planets, and he is the known of the king of the heavens. And among the Adityas, he is the Vishnu, total 12 in number, and Krishna is the principal. And Marichi, among the Maruts, Marichi, there are 50 varieties of wind blowing in space. And of these winds, the controlling deity Marichi represents Krishna. And among the Rudras, who are 11 in number, Lord Shiva is predominant, and who is in charge of mode of ignorance. And Kuvera, the master of the master treasurer of demigods, who is among the yakshas and rakshasas. Among the Vasus, he's Agni, and among the generals, he's Kartikeya, son of Lord Parvati and Lord Shiva, and he's the chief of military commanders. And among the Gandharvas, he's Chitrartha, The Gandharvas planet is filled with entities who sing beautifully, and among them, the best singer is Chitrartha. Among the creators, Brahma, the first living creature within the universe. And among the Daitya demons, the devoted Prahlada. We know Diti and Aditya are two sisters. The sons of Aditya are called Adityas, and the sons of Diti are called Daityas. All the Adityas are devotees of the Lord, and all the Daityas are atheistic. Although Prahlada was born in the family of Daityas, he was a great devotee from his childhood because of his devotional service and godly nature. He's considered to be a representative of Krishna. And among the reparted ancestors, he is Aryama, and cause of procreation, he is Kandarpa. And among the dispensers of law, he is Yama. And the next section is about the sages. Of all the sages, I'm Vyasa. Among the Munis or learned men conversant in Vedic knowledge, Vyasa is the greatest because he explained the Vedic knowledge in many different ways for the understanding of the common mass of people in the age of Kali. And Vyasa is also known as incarnation of Krishna. Among the great sages, he's Bhrigu. Among sages, among demigods, Narada Muni, because he's considered as the greatest devotee in the universe. Among the priests, he's Brihaspati. Among the perfected beings, sage Kapila. Among greatest thinkers, he's Ushana. And the humans and kings, among the Pandavas, Dhananjaya, who is nothing but Arjuna. Among the men, who is monarch. Among the descendants of Rishni, he is Vasudeva. And Vasudeva, he referred in this verse from the Bhagavad Gita as Baladeva or Balarama, and which is Krishna's immediate expansion. Among the animals, horses, he is Uchesha. And the lordly elephants, he is Airavata. Among the cows, he is Surabhi, found in spiritual world, can give milk anytime. And among serpents, like there are hooded serpents and unhooded, hooded and unhooded. Among the unhooded serpents, he is Vasuki, and among the hooded serpents, he's Naga. Ananta. Among the aquatics, he is demigod Varuna. Among the fishes, he's Shark. Among the beasts, he's lion. Among the birds, Garuda. Among the loss, from the section of loss and crime, that time is the biggest subduer. Time is a representative of Krishna, because in due course of time, there will be a great fire and everything will be annihilated. Among all kinds of killers, time is the ultimate, because time kills everything. And among wielders of weapon, it is Rama. Among the cheats, gambling. And when someone wants to, if Krishna wants to deceive, no one can compete with him in that. Means of suppressing lawlessness is punishment. Among weapons, he's thunderbolt. And I'm all devouring death. And different qualities, he's wise, wisdom. And secret things, he's silence. Those who seek victory, moralities, the splendids, his splendor. Among women, these specific qualities, like these 7 qualities are feminine, considered fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and patience. I'm adventure, I'm victory, I'm the strength of the strong. Nature, lights. Among the lights, he's the radiant sun. And among the stars, moon is considered as the prominent star. Again, from mountains, there are movable and immovable. Mountain Meru mountain is considered as the highest mountain. Among the movable, the immovables, it is Himalaya. Among the water bodies, it's ocean. The trees, banyan tree in India, most of the people will pray to the banyan tree. And purifiers, he's wind. Among flowing rivers, the great Ganges. Among the creations, beginning, middle, and end, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Among the months, Margashira, November, December is considered as auspicious. Seasons, flower-bearing spring, and the inexhaustible time. No beings moving or non-moving can exist without me. And Krishna also explains various philosophical truths from his opulences. I'm the super soul in all living entities' heart. Among living beings, he's the living force. Among the senses, I'm the mind. And there are a couple of others. And among the poetry, he's the Gayatri. Among the letters, he's the first letter, Akara. Among the compound words, he's the dual compound. Example is Ramakrishna. Sciences, spiritual science of self. Among the logicians, conclusive truth. Among the hymns in the Samaveda, he is Bruhat Sama. Among Vedic mantras, he is vibration, the transcendental Om, and the sacrifices, chanting of the holy names. Because chanting holy name doesn't have any kind of it's having non-violence. And among Vedas is the Sama Vedas. And overall summary, chapter 10 helps us concentrating mind in Krishna consciousness in full devotional service and attain highest devotional perfection and associating with the Supreme Lord. And the famous Chatur Shloki helps us in understanding the essence of Gita. And overall, chapter 10 gives us Lord Krishna's unlimited opulences. Hare Krishna. Thank you for giving this opportunity, and thank Jai Sachidanand Prabhuji for helping us in understanding more about Srila Prabhupada's teachings. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much for remembering somebody, Prabhu. I request all the devotees, please stay within the time limit, or else everything will push out. Right? So I know it's very, very difficult to contain everything in 20 minutes. But please humbly beg all of you to please stay within that limit. And I will try to get send a reminder maybe 2 minutes before the time ends. Please go ahead. Let's start.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Hare Krishna devotees, thank you so much for giving us this wonderful opportunity to summarize chapter 11 on the occasion of Gita Jayanti. Myself and Vivek Prabhu would be splitting the verses, summarization. So in chapter 10, we just saw, as very well summarized by Vinil Prabhu, how Krishna wonderfully describes his opulences. And Krishna tells Arjuna there is no need for understanding how things exist in their separate opulence and grandeur. All things are existing because Krishna enters them as super soul. Visthabhyaham idam Krishnam ekam shena sthito jagat, he says in the last verse. Arjuna accepts Lord Krishna's position as a supreme absolute and requests to hear more of his opulences or potencies. And chapter 10 describes all of the most prominent portion of Lord's infinite opulences on which a devotee like us can fix his or her mind and will be able to remember Lord Krishna. Chapter 11 begins with Arjuna saying, Moho ayam vigato mama. That is, illusion is over. Arjuna no longer thinks of Krishna as a mere human being, as a friend of his, but instead as the source of everything. But then Arjuna thinks, maybe I may accept Krishna as the source of everything, but others may not. So in order to establish Krishna's divinity for all, Arjuna requests Krishna to show his universal Vishwarupa form. In verses 11.2 and 3, Arjuna says, O lotus-eyed one, I wish to see how you have entered into this cosmic manifestation. Arjuna knows that in spite of Krishna being all-pervading, he's yet not personally present everywhere. He says, I would like to see how you're acting from within the universe, although Krishna, you're apart from it, you're not in the universe. Now, Prabhupada says in his purport that the Lord residing inside Arjuna as Paramatma perfectly knew that Arjuna had no special desire to see him in his universal form. But this is only to see the universal form to set a criterion, for in the future, there would be so many imposters trying to pose as God, and this would set as a criterion. Therefore, anybody who claims to be God should be prepared to show his or her universal form for confirmation. In 11.4, we see that Arjuna pleads to Krishna for his inconceivable grace, so that he could see his universal form. He addresses the Lord as Yogeshwara here, as the Lord is the master of all mystic power with inconceivable potencies. This is very important because Arjuna shows us how to approach a spiritual master to receive knowledge. Arjuna understands that him being a finite living entity, it is not possible to understand the unlimited and finite. If Krishna likes, he can reveal himself by his grace, and Krishna is not obliged to reveal himself unless one surrenders completely unto him. So we learn from Arjuna what is the mood of understanding Krishna, and therefore it is only by the grace of Lord by which we can understand Krishna. In verses 5 to 8, Krishna gives a prelude of what Krishna is going to reveal to Arjuna. Krishna says, O best of the Bharatas, see here the different manifestations of all the demigods. Behold the many, many wonderful things which no one has ever seen of or heard of. Bahunadrishta Purvani Pashyat Charyani Bharata. O Arjuna, whatever you wish to see, behold at once in this body of mine. This universal form can show you whatever you now desire to see and whatever you may want to see in the future. Everything moving, unmoving is here completely in one place. Krishna in 11.8 says, oh, but you cannot see me with your present eyes. Therefore, I shall give you divine eyes. Divyam dadhami te chakshu, pashyame yogam aishwaryam. Now, there were so many people in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Were they all able to see this universal form of Krishna? The answer is no, because Krishna, you need a special set of divine eyes, and Krishna gave divine eyes only to Arjuna. So to see the universal form of Krishna, Arjuna is told not to change his mind, but his vision. Why is Arjuna, who's able to always see the two-handed form of Krishna, who's like the source of all forms, not able to see this universal form of Krishna, which is a partial expansion of the Lord? And why does he need divine vision to see this form of the Lord? Acharyas have given an explanation that devotees are not inclined to see the opulences of the Lord. For example, the Vrindavan Vasis, they see Krishna doing extraordinary feat, achieving extraordinary feat, like killing of Putana when he was just a small baby. Everybody can be awestruck thinking of how a small baby can kill a demoness, but the Vrindavan Vasis were not interested in knowing that. They actually only wanted to know if Krishna was safe or not. And devotees were correctly situated in a transcendental relationship with Krishna. They're attracted only by the loving features of the Lord, not by any godless display of opulences. And in their loving exchange, they forget that Krishna is the supreme Lord. Of course, they're covered by the yoga maya potency of the Lord, so they cannot see. What was revealed by Krishna was described by Sanjaya to Dhritarashtra from the verses 9 to 13. Sanjaya says, Arjuna saw in that universal form unlimited mouths, unlimited eyes, unlimited wonderful visions. He repeatedly uses the word aneka, aneka. Krishna wore celestial garments and many divine scents were smeared over his body. Everything was unlimited, all expanding. Sanjaya says, Divi Surya Sahasrasya Bhaved Yugapad Uttitha. If hundreds and thousands of suns were to rise at once into the sky, that's how effulgent the Lord looked in his Vishwarupa. By the inconceivable potency of the Lord, Arjuna could see all of this unlimited form of the Lord sitting in one place. So Sanjaya also sees the universal form. And how is he able to see? It is because of the mercy of his spiritual master Vyasadeva. The same Krishna who benedicted Arjuna to see his universal form, Krishna in the form of Vyasadeva gave Sanjaya the benediction to see and become the medium through which this conversation between the Lord and his devotee Arjuna can be recorded for the entire world. From 14th verse onwards, Sanjaya starts describing Arjuna's response to what he is seeing. Arjuna becomes bewildered and astonished as his hair is standing on end, and he bowed down his head to offer obeisances, and with folded hands, he began to pray to the Lord. Tataha sa Vishmaya Vishto Hrishta Roma Dhananjaya. Once the divine vision is revealed, the relationship between Krishna and Arjuna changes immediately. Arjuna was inspired by the relationship of wonder, and in that wonder, even though he's very calm and sober, he was feeling ecstatic, and his hair stood up at the end, and he bowed down in front of Krishna. Arjuna could see Lord Brahma sitting on the lotus flower, Lord Shiva, all the sages and divine serpents. He could see many, many arms, bellies, terrible teeth, mouths and eyes expanded everywhere without limit. Arjuna says, Anadi Madhyantam Ananta Viryam, you're without origin, middle, or end. Your glory is unlimited. The sun and moon are your eyes. Oh Krishna, seeing this wondrous, terrible form, all the planetary systems are perturbed, and all the hosts of demigods in all the planetary systems, not just this system, in all the three lokas, everybody is much afraid, and the demigods are offering prayers with folded hands. And from 11.23, you see how Arjuna's rasa changes to fear. In all the directions, he's bewildered. Arjuna says, oh, all-pervading Vishnu, seeing you with your many radiant colors touching the sky, your gaping mouths and your great glowing eyes, my mind is perturbed by fear. I can no longer maintain my steadiness or equilibrium of mind. Now, a beautiful question was asked by a devotee, and Chaitanya Charan Prabhu gave a wonderful answer. The question was Arjuna's faith enhanced by seeing the universal form? So after hearing the Chatur Sloki, the 10th chapter, we understand that Arjuna is enlightened and he accepts Krishna as absolute truth in 10.12, 13, 14, where Arjuna says, Param Brahma, Param Dhamam, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan. And in the beginning of the 11th chapter, Arjuna says, Moho ayam vigato mama. My illusion has now been dispelled by hearing Krishna's instructions. So we clearly understand that Arjuna was already enlightened by the 10th chapter, and he has no doubt about Krishna being the supreme absolute truth. Arjuna, however, makes a request to see the magnificent universal form of Lord. And the Acharyas explain that this request is only for the benediction of the others, the entire world. After seeing the Vishwarupa, Arjuna is trembling and offering prayers to Krishna. And Arjuna has, with hair standing on at the end, he asks Krishna to reveal again his form as the personality of Godhead. It is not that Arjuna had any doubts. that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Arjuna already had all the faith, but the process of becoming attracted to Krishna is endless because Krishna's attractiveness is endless. So yes, the darshan of Krishna's Vishwarupa added a different flavor to his already existing summit of faith. At the same time, we need to understand that Arjuna, being a stalwart devotee, a direct associate of the Lord, he could make such a request to Krishna to show his Vishwarupa. But for us, it is always Katayantascha mam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. As Krishna says in the 10th chapter, the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me, and the lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. Hare Krishna. I'll pass it over to Vivek Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So in verse 25, Arjuna continues his prayers, but he's in the mode of fear and he's continuously losing his balance and he's bewildered in all directions. He says, Dishona jane na labhe cha sarma. And from verse 26 to 31, Arjuna describes his fear in terms of what he's seeing. Arjuna is describing Dhritarashtra, Bhishma, Drona, Karna, and all the other chief great soldiers rushing into Krishna's fearful mouths in his universal form. Some are really detailed and literal descriptions as they are being crushed. Their heads are being crushed under Krishna's teeth, and he's trembling looking at all this. Now, these soldiers were very great and supposed to be unconquerable. And this specific description shows that no one is exempt from material death, and everyone is just rushing into the universal form like rivers into the ocean, like moths dashing to a destruction into a blazing fire. And Krishna and his universal form is devouring everything and everyone from all sides. And after this, Arjuna is terrified and he asks the Lord, please tell me who you are. I want to know about you. And he wants to know about what the Lord's mission is. Vijnatam ichhami bhavantam adyam nahi prajanami tava pravrittim. I do not know what your mission is. And verses 32 to 34 are, I would say, popular verses where Krishna says, he says, time I am, Kalosmi, the great destroyer of worlds, Loka Kshayakrit, and I have come here to destroy all people. Lokan Samahartum Iha Pravritta. With the exception of you, the Pandavas, all the soldiers here on both sides will be slain. Krishna is also showing Arjuna with his description, and this is the primary purpose of the universal, this is secondary purpose, I would say. From primary purpose, Anita just talked about how the primary purpose is to set a standard for who the Lord really is, how great he is. And the secondary purpose is about how everyone is eventually destroyed by Krishna in the form of all devouring time. And no one is exempt from, not even Brahma is exempt from the vagaries of time, albeit it's in a longer fashion. And Prabhupada writes in his purport, death could not be checked even if Arjuna did not fight. They were already dead. And Krishna says, oh Savyasachi, they are already put to death by my arrangement, and you can be but an instrument, nimitta matram, in the fight. He can't be anything else because they are already put to death by Krishna's will. Like this, the universe is also an instrument carrying out the orders with the sanction of the Lord. And of course, this Kalosmi, time I am, was quoted by Robert Oppenheimer. He was the maker of atomic bomb, but it's often misrepresented when talked in conjunction with the atomic bomb, that I'm death, the destroyer of worlds. And that's why Oppenheimer was not a devotee. So it is very important for us to listen to specific translations, or else stand the risk of being misunderstood. Now, verse number 35, Arjuna then says his prayers and glorifies his universal form. This time again, he's fearful and he speaks to him in a faltering voice. Sa gadgadam bhita pranamya. And he's now praying to Krishna not as a friend, but as a devotee who's awestruck in wonder and fear. And verses 36 to 40 are the glorification of the universal form by Arjuna, and he answers the questions. And these glorifications answer the question as to why we should worship Krishna. And he gives so many beautiful descriptions. He says, O master of the senses, Rishikesha, The entire world is happy hearing your name and is attached to you. Perfect beings, Siddha Sangha, offer you respect, and all demons are fleeing. Everyone should worship him, for he is the original creator of Lord Brahma. O Ananta, unlimited, Devesha, Deva Isha, God of gods, Jagannivasa, refuge of the universe, Aksharam, imperishable and transcendental to all Sat Asat, cause and effect. And Arjuna emphasizes especially the Jagannivasa potency in the following verse by calling him Asya Vishwasya Param Nidhanam and Param Chadama. You are the ultimate sanctuary of this material, of this manifested universe, and the ultimate refuge. And he is the supreme knower, and everything is pervaded by him. And everyone and everything, both in this material world, wherever they are, can take refuge in Lord Krishna as the supreme shelter. And you are the air, and he says you are the air, the supreme controller, water, moon, Brahma, and the great grandfather. And these verses describe Krishna as not just a supreme creator who's created the universe and let go of it. He pervades in it every single moment and in every single atom of the universe. And Arjuna continues and then offers obeisances and respects from all sides out of extreme ecstasy as a devotee and who's seen the universal form. Now, every single glorification in this verse offers profound meaning. And in verses 41-42, Arjuna is now in complete awe of the universal form and is starting to apologize and ask for forgiveness, realizing his past transgressions. Oh no, what have I done? I have rashly addressed him as, oh Krishna, oh Yadava, oh my friend. He has playfully dishonored him so many times, jesting and relaxed, lay on the same bed, or sat together, sometimes alone and sometimes in front of many friends. Please excuse me. At this point, to put in contrast, we all wonder how Krishna, with all these wonderful and unimaginable opulences, is in a relationship as a dear friend with Arjuna. This is beyond anything that we see in a material relationship when it comes to reciprocation. A simple case in point is the position of a charioteer that Krishna took for Arjuna. Verse 43, Arjuna continues the glorification of the Lord. He calls him Pitas Lokasya Characharasya. You are the father of the complete manifestations, and you are the Guru Gariyan, the supreme spiritual master. There is no one in the three worlds who is greater than you. In verses 44 to 46, Arjuna then implores Krishna to tolerate him, just like a father tolerates a son, a friend tolerates another friend, the husband, his wife, and begs him for his mercy. And verses 45 and 46, Arjuna says, now even though he's very happy, but he's trembling with fear, and he begs to see the four-handed Narayana form with the Kirit, Gada, Chakra, Lotus, Shankha Chakra, Gada, Hasta of the lotus form of the Lord for this very reason. And verses 47 to 55 are Krishna's reply, which are one of the samam bomam of this chapter. Krishna replies that he has happily shown him his universal form by his internal potency, Atma Yogat, which no one has ever seen before. And he says it's not easy to see this. It's not possible. Na Veda Yajna Dhyayanair, not by Vedic sacrifices, na Danair, not by charity, na Chakriyabhir, not by pious activities, na Tapobhir, Ugrai, not by severe penances. And can anyone see him in this form in the material? It's not at all possible. And Krishna goes back into his four-handed form and then his two-handed form. Seeing this beautiful form, Arjuna is relaxing a little bit and he's now composed in his mind. And verses 52, Krishna speaks about his two-handed form. Durdarsham idam rupam. This form that you are now seeing is very difficult to behold. Even the demigods are ever seeking the opportunity to see this form. Deva apyasya rupasya nityam darshana kankshinaha. They're ever seeking the opportunity. And this is talking about Krishna's two-handed form. Just a few verses ago, it was already hard to see Krishna's universal form. And this form is even more hard. And Krishna mentions that this, and in the following verses, we get to know as to how we can reach Krishna. And verse 53, Krishna talks about how the same things, how it is difficult to see even his two-handed form. Naham veder na tapasa na dane na chejyaya. The form you are seeing with your transcendental eyes cannot be understood simply by studying the Vedas, nor by undergoing serious penances, nor charity, nor by worship, and it is not by these means that one can see me. And how can Krishna be seen? This answer is in the last two verses of this chapter. Bhaktvata anyaya shakya aham evam vidorjuna jnatum drashtum cha tatvena praveshtum cha parantapa. My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and thus can be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. Mat karma krit mat paramo mat bhakta sangha varjitah nirvairah sarva bhuteshu yasamam eti pandava. My dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service, free from the contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation, he who works for me, he who makes me the supreme goal of his life, and he who is friendly to every living being, he certainly comes to me. This verse, Prabhupada writes in his purport, is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. Mat karma krit mat paramo mat bhakta. Engaged in doing my work, considering me as the supreme, and engaged in my devotional service. Sanghavarjita nirvaira sarva bhuteshu, freed from all contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculation, without an enemy among all living beings. And this is summarized beautifully in Haribhakta Vilasa, chapter 11. Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya vachanam. Everything should be done in Krishna. Whatever is not necessary or anukulam to devotional service, you have to just leave. Not conducive to devotional service, you have to just leave. And everything should be done in the service of Krishna. And this is Krishna karma. Hare Krishna. And all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thanks so much for beautifully summarizing those words once again. To please stick to your time. Because everything will, we don't want to encourage upon others and not push everything. So thank you so much once again for beautifully summarizing this chapter. Hare Krishna. I think Ram is next. Chapter 12.
Yes, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Should I start now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Sure, Prabhuji. And yeah, okay. Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this chapter. So I'm going to be talking about chapter 12, and I'll just try to be I'm just going to try to summarize it. Everything I say is a paraphrasing of what's said in Prabhupada's purports. So I apologize in advance for any misinterpretation on my part. It's definitely on me. So yeah, so I just want to talk about chapter 12. Chapter 12 is called Devotional Service, and basically the chapter has 3 sections, and these sections are all in the theme of trying to explain how to become, what are the qualities of a devotee, and like how should you become a devotee, and what type of service to Krishna is best. So basically this chapter is really all about devotional service and explaining what type is best and how to get to that stage. So the first section is 12.1 to 12.7. And this section basically first asks which method of worship is best to Krishna, devotional service in the form of bhakti or worship of Brahman. So this first section is basically Arjuna is trying to clarify which form of service to Krishna is best. So 12.1 is where Arjuna asks the question, which I just mentioned. And in the purport, Prabhupada says that there are basically 2 categories of transcendentalists, the personalists and the impersonalists. This question by Arjuna is basically asking which is better among these 2. So the impersonalists have been mentioned before as well in Bhagavad Gita. For example, in verse 9.15 of Bhagavad Gita, the translation of that verse is, others who engage in sacrifice by the cultivation of knowledge worship the Supreme Lord as one without a second, as diverse in many and in the universal form. So basically, and that the impersonalists are the ekatvena aspect of this verse. So basically, they're ones who worship Krishna as oneness without a personal form. So basically, the point is these impersonalists and personalists sort of have been encountered before this difference. And the reason Arjuna is asking this right now, or one reason which is mentioned in the purports, of Prabhupada is that in chapter 11 of the universal form, which was just covered, Arjuna found that focusing on the impersonal form of Krishna, for example, the entire universal form of Krishna, is very difficult. And in fact, Arjuna found it very hard to focus on, so he had to switch to the four-handed and finally the two-handed form of Krishna, which is a very sort of well-known pastime, which was just covered. And the reason was that the two-handed form, which is the personal form of Krishna, is the easiest to focus on and meditate and serve. So the point is that it has been shown before that Arjuna prefers that the personal form over the impersonal form because it's easier to focus on. And the reason Arjuna is asking this question is to confirm that he's doing the right thing by thinking that the personal form of Krishna is best. So that's basically the question and why Arjuna is asking this. And then 12.2 is a very direct answer to this question. Krishna directly says that the personalists are considered more perfect devotees. So worshiping the personal form is better. It's said very clearly in 12.2. But then Krishna goes on to say in 12.3, 4, and 5 that the impersonalist form of worship will also reach Krishna, but advancement is very troublesome. The words used are dukkham and klesham. So basically it means that advancement is really hard to make and it's very troublesome. So this is similar to how in previous chapters, like chapters 3, 4, 5, 6 of Bhagavad Gita, where different yoga forms are described, Krishna says that these forms also will work. They will eventually reach Krishna, but they are much more difficult than bhakti. So this is similar to that, that's possible to reach Krishna, but advancement is very difficult. And Krishna further contrasts this by saying in verses 6 and 7 that those in devotional service to Krishna in the personal form are swiftly liberated and come to Krishna. So the exact words used are, in the translation are, but those who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, O son of Pritha, for them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. So this message is also, this is the main sort of message of Bhagavad Gita, and it's also said, for example, in verse 8.14, which says, the translation is, for one who always remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Pritha, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. So the point is that Krishna is really contrasting this a lot by saying that the other forms of worship to Krishna work, but they will not work as fast or will not be as easy. And Krishna is always saying throughout the entire Bhagavad Gita that the best form of devotional service is the personal form, and it's very quick. So that's basically the answer to that question by Arjun. And now Krishna goes on to explain in the next section, which is verses 12.8 to 12.12, the progressive stages of bhakti. So basically now Krishna has told what form of devotional service is best in section 1. And now section 2 kind of describes how to get there, or what are the possible stages at which you can perform this devotional service to still obtain Krishna. So 12.8 is the sort of ideal stage. And the way these verses are structured is kind of like, if you can't do this, then at least try and do this. And if you can't do this, then at least try to do this, which is sort of one step lower. But all of these are working towards 12.8, which is the best form of devotional service, which is called Shuddha Bhakti, where the mind and intelligence are fixed on Krishna. So this is basically ideal. And the translation is, just fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage all your intelligence in me. Thus you will live in me always without a doubt. So basically, if you always think about Krishna and fix your intelligence on him, then you will reach Krishna. So that's the ideal stage, which has been mentioned before. But then the next verse, 12.9, says that if you cannot fix your mind on Krishna at all times, at least practice the regulative principles of bhakti. So those are no meat eating, gambling, intoxication, illicit connections. I think that's what it's referring to. So 12.9 says, my dear Arjuna, O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of bhakti yoga. In this way, develop a desire to attain me. So that's sort of one step which is a little easier, which is if you cannot always think about Krishna, then at least try and follow the regulative principles. So the next verse goes on to make that a little easier, which is 12.10, which is if you cannot practice the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga, then just try to work for me, because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. So that's what 12.10 is. And essentially, what this says is that if you cannot always practice regulative principles, then at least try to work for Krishna. This was also said in verse 11.55 of Bhagavad Gita, which was just in the previous chapter, where Krishna said, "My dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service, free from the contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculations, he who works for me, he who makes me supreme goal of his life, and who is very friendly to every living being, he certainly comes to me." So basically, the he who works for me is also mentioned in that verse. So working for Krishna can include examples in the purport that are mentioned of 11.55, or things like helping like the temple, or like helping to spread Krishna's message, and those kind of things, which are all already stated in Bhagavad Gita to be very important for very, very useful for obtaining Krishna. So basically that's one step lower, which is if you cannot always practice the regulative principles, then at least try to work for Krishna in as much as you can possibly do. And then 12.11, which is the next verse, makes that a little easier, even from working for Krishna all the time, which is, the translation says, "If, however, you are unable to work in this consciousness of me, then try to act giving up all results of your work, and try to be self-situated." So basically, if you cannot work for Krishna, just do whatever work you like and offer the results to Krishna. So that's one stage even lower. You don't have to work in a way that directly benefits Krishna. Not benefits Krishna, he doesn't need any help from us, but that you're directly serving Krishna. But any work that you do, just try and offer the results. So that's one step even lower. And finally, the next verse, 12.12, says that if you cannot take to this practice, then engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. Better than knowledge, however, is meditation, and better than meditation is renunciation of the fruits of action. For by such renunciation, one can attain peace of mind. So basically, this work summarizes the other yoga states, which were mentioned from chapters 3 to 6 in Bhagavad Gita. And again, Krishna says that Krishna mentions these in this sort of chain from 8 to 12 to emphasize the fact that while these practices are not the best, they will still work. They will just be much more difficult. So 12.12 summarizes those methods. And essentially now this section, just to recap section 2 of chapter 12, which is verses 12.8 to 12, were the progressive stages of bhakti. So it started from the ideal, which is Shuddha Bhakti, which is engaging your mind and intelligence on Krishna, which was 12.8. And then it slowly worked downwards for anything that, which is easier to perform, easier sort of methods of serving Krishna, where you just think about him, where you just practice the regulative principles, or you just work for Krishna, or you do whatever work you want and offer the results. So those kind of things. And basically this section tells us how to gradually reach Krishna. And then the final section is section 3, which is 12.13 to 12.20. And this section talks about the qualities of a devotee. So now Krishna has described in section 1 which type of devotee is best. And in section 2, he said how to gradually become such a devotee. So now in section 3, Krishna describes the qualities of a person who is a devotee. So the sort of structure of 13 to 20, verses 13 to 20 is a bunch of qualities that one sees in a person who is a devotee. So I'm going to sort of just go through these, and then as the purports have some sort of explanations that's specific to some of the verses, so I'll talk about those. So 13 and 14 say, "One who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me, such a devotee of mine is very dear to me." So basically, some of the qualities mentioned here are not envious, but being kind to everybody, which is pretty hard. But it's one of the qualities mentioned. Who does not think himself a proprietor, so free from false ego. That's another thing that's mentioned. And this has come up a lot before in Bhagavad Gita too, but it's mentioned again now. Who is equal in both happiness and distress. So this is pretty similar to verse 2.14 of Bhagavad Gita, which I'm just going to read the translation. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O sign of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So this concept has also come before in the Bhagavad Gita, but Krishna is mentioning it again. And then 12.15, which is the next verse, is more qualities which are in a devotee. The translation is, he by whom no one is put into difficulty and who is not disturbed by anyone, who is equally poised in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, is very dear to me. So again, we can see the equipoise in happiness and distress concept. And then the fear and anxiety, being free from fear and anxiety, is basically if you're always in Krishna consciousness, then you have confidence that Krishna will take care of everything. So that's why you shouldn't be sort of affected by fear and anxiety. So that's why that's mentioned. The next verse is pretty similar, 12.16. My devotee who is not dependent on the ordinary course of actions, who is pure expert without cares, free from all pains, and not striving for some result, is very dear to me. So this verse is basically not be super materially minded, to not always strive for material things like money, etc. But this is pretty hard to do, since like a lot of like education and like society is structured around getting as much education and money as possible. So basically this verse is saying to not always be focusing on that, and instead, focus on Krishna, or not focus on just always trying to get more money or more material opulence. The next verse is 12.17, which is, one who neither rejoices nor grieves, who neither laments nor desires, who renounces both auspicious and inauspicious things, such a devotee is very dear to me. So this is similar to previous verses in that it's saying to be equipoised in happiness and distress, essentially. So you don't rejoice or grieve, nor lament nor desire. And then also this verse brings up the point of renunciation, which is renouncing everything, both auspicious and inauspicious. 12.18 and 19, this is nearing the end. One who is equal to friends and enemies, who is equipoised in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy, who's always free from contaminating association, always silent and satisfied with everything, who doesn't care for any residence, who is fixed in knowledge, and who is engaged in devotional service. Such a person is very dear to me. So basically the whole point of being equipoised, regardless of material circumstances, brought up a lot more again, and then always being satisfied no matter the material circumstance. And then finally 12.20 summarizes this by saying, those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engage themselves with faith, making me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me. So basically this verse is a conclusion by saying that those who have these qualities or practice this form of devotional service are very dear to Krishna. And restating verse 12.6, Krishna again says that they very quickly come to Krishna. So again, this chapter talked about devotional service, the qualities of devotees, the type of devotee, like the form of worship for which is best for devotees, and also how to progressively reach that stage, or what sort of other options there are to also serve Krishna without having to always think about Krishna and always fix your mind on Krishna. There's other progressive stages given. So basically this chapter summarizes how to become a devotee, what type of devotee is best, and then what are the qualities of a devotee. So this chapter is a lot about that. And thank you so much for listening. And again, if I made any mistakes, it's definitely my fault. I was just trying to paraphrase Prabhupada's purports. So thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thanks so much, Ram, for the wonderful summarization. I'm going to speak. I will try to summarize chapter number 13. And before that, I will let you recite Mangalasharan prayers and then I'll go ahead. Om-Jnana-Timirandasya Jnana-Shalakaya Chakshim Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadam Yidadati Sapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakabalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sarvana Ruganatam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sarvana Lipta Shakam Butamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabantu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tattakācana Gaurangi Shirate Bhavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriyam Pachagatruvishtha Katandhu Evaja Patidana Pavanepi Vashri Namo Mam Vishwadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshtarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai. Hey Krishna, thank you so much, all of us for joining. I'm trying to summarize chapter number 13, and this is the first chapter in the new section based on the so to say devotees divide 18 chapters into different sections: 1 to 6, 7 to 12, and 13 to 18. The first chapter of that particular section, Jnana section. And I recently read a beautiful article by His Grace Chaitanya Prabhu about the division of these 6 chapters in different perspectives. So just recite that and then I'll start from there. He mentioned the first 6 chapters talks about who we are. Basically, we are not the body, but the spiritual soul. We are the spirit soul, right? And then we are, as spirit souls, we are transmigrating from one body to another in different various lifetimes. So based on this understanding of our identity, the first 6 chapters talks about how to practically, in a mode of dutiful detachment, how to act. That's karma yoga, how to act towards Supreme, knowing our identity. And that's who we are. Then in chapter number 7 to 12, the middle section talks about whose we are. So many times we identify with ourselves. We are this, we have this particular caste, this particular race, this particular religion, nation. So many things. We want a sense of belonging. So this section talks about whose we are, basically who do we actually belong to, right? So Krishna mentions that we ultimately belong to the ultimate reality, that is Supreme Person, Sri Krishna. And it talks about the elaborate talks about nature of Krishna and how he pervades the entire universe. Sarvam Khalvidam Brahman. It talks in the scriptures, Upanishads mention Sarvam Khalvidam, everything is pervaded by Brahman. Krishna. So by appreciating this, the middle 6 chapters talked about how to act in a mode of devotional service attaching to Krishna. Talks about detachment, first 6, talks about attachment here. Yeah. Then the next 6 chapters talk about 13 to 18. This Krishna talks about where we are. So we know who we are, whose we are, and where we are. We are in this material world, right? So Krishna basically deconstructs or disassembles the material world, right, into its components to make us, a bit more, make us understand what's going on, right? So by providing more philosophically, informed vision, Krishna is, making us, giving us knowledge how to act properly. Okay, we know, the most important point is to know the enemy of this material world, right? And we equip ourselves to fight against that. That's Jnana Yoga. So Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Basically, Karma and Jnana Yoga requires the pillar support of Bhakti Yoga to become successful, right? So first 6 talks about how Karma Yoga leads to Bhakti, as Megam already mentioned in her summarization chapter number 9. How Karma Yoga leads to Bhakti, Karma leads to Bhakti, and Jnana leads to Bhakti, right? So 7th, 12 is Bhakti Yoga. Now in this 13th chapter, the precise nature of the jiva, the super soul, and the material nature will be explained by Krishna. So all these points which have been basically in the last section of Bhagavad Gita, 13 to 18, they had been more or less dealt with in the previous chapters. The Krishna is going to expand on those. And the 13th chapter starts with a very beautiful verse, right? So you could see there's no relation between chapter 12 and chapter 13. Normally there are relations, but it's just like if you go to a teacher and teacher is explaining something, the student doesn't have to exactly the student doesn't have to ask only what the teacher talked about. It shouldn't have preconceived ideas. I heard from this, I heard from that. Right? Based on that, he may ask some questions. Similarly, Arjuna, because his Vedic studies by growing up, he has heard these particular terms and he wants to know what these terms actually mean. Because the perfect person is present to answer the questions in a perfect way. Right? So first was spoken by Arjuna. He has questions on 6 terms. This is Arjuna Uvacha Pragritim Purusham Cheva Kshetram Kshetratyam Evacha Etad Viditum Ichhami Jnanam Nyayam Cha Keshava. The 6 terms, he wants to know the meaning of 6 terms. So he's asking, okay, sure, please tell me. What are 6 terms? What is Purusha, the enjoyer? Prakriti, material nature. Jnana, what is knowledge? Nyayam, what is object of knowledge? What is Kshetra, the field of activity? And Kshetratnya is the knower of the field of activity. The 6 things Arjuna wants to know. And Krishna is going to systematically give answers to these 6 things. So Krishna has already talked about how bhakti is superior to jnana, everything. Right? So if you see the name of the chapter, Nature, Enjoy, Consciousness. Prabhupada in his purport, to the first 6 first verse, mentions that while discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the super soul, we shall find 3 different topics: the Lord, living entity, and matter. Right? So of the 6 different terms, 3 are conscious and 3 are non-conscious, not conscious. So Kshetrajna, the knower of the body, Purusha, the enjoyer, and Nyayam, the object of knowledge. These 3 are conscious. Whereas Prakriti, Kshetra, and Jnana, they are not conscious. Right? So, the Lord, living entity, and matter. These 3 things are basically nature is matter, enjoy is Purusha, and consciousness is Jiva. That's how the name comes up. Nature, enjoy, consciousness. So Krishna first answers the 3rd and 4th question of Arjuna. What is basically who is Kshetra and who is Kshetrajna? So Kshetra just means the body. So based on the capacity of living entity, Prabhupada mentions, I'm going to read Prabhupada's quote, but basically, so it says Kshetrajnam chapi mam viddhi. Right? So based on the capacity to enjoy sense gratification, a living entity is awarded a body or a field of activity. Therefore, the body is called Kshetra, or the field of activity for the conditioned soul. Now, Kshetrajna means one who knows the field of activity, one who knows the body. So Krishna mentioned there are 2 Kshetrajnas. One is a living entity and the super soul. The living entity is a Kshetrajna, knower of the body to a small extent. And super soul is a knower of the body, not just one body, of all the body, Sarva Kshetra issue, to the full extent. So if you would say that, oh, I'm the knower of the body, that would be not a correct statement, because if you know our body totally, then we wouldn't need to go to doctor to know what's happening in the body. So we know what is our body basically to a limited extent, to very partial, very, very less extent. And Krishna knows about all the bodies to the full extent. So there is Kshetra, one who dwells, the body is Kshetra, and one who dwells in the body is called Deha and Dehi. And when dwells in the body, owner of the body is called as Kshetrajna. And there are 2, the living entity and the super soul. Now, in the next section, Krishna talks about, Krishna explains more about Kshetra and Kshetrajna. What is the body made of? Right? How is the body constituted? The materials of the body under which it's made, whose control this body is working, how the changes are taking place, where from the changes are taking place, what are the causes, what are the reasons, all different things Krishna is going to mention in the next few verses. Right? So in verse number 6, Krishna verse number 5, before that, Krishna was a very important point. Even he actually, because he is Jajjad Acharati Shreshthas, because he's the perfect person who leads by example, he's telling that Kshetram, he said, Rishi Bir Bahuda Gitam. All this one talked about, what I'm going to talk about, is mentioned by the Rishis previously. So he's quoting Acharyas, basically, saying that, so we should tell that, we should repeat what's been told. Like, of course, Krishna is being humble here, he's the source of everything. But he's telling that, oh, what I'm going to tell has already been told by Rishis. Rishi Bir Bahuda Gitam. Right? So in 6th verse, Krishna talks about how the body is constituted. These components of this material world is described. Right? And then Krishna talks about what are the qualities of the body and what changes the body undergoes. And Krishna mentions few of the qualities, few of the symptoms. And Shri Baldev Vidyaభూషణ్ in his commentary gives additional symptoms. In that there will be more symptoms. Krishna has given limited symptoms, but Baldev Vidyaಭൂಷణ్ gives even more symptoms from Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. Right? And then 6 changes, very famous: birth, growth, maintenance, production of byproducts, dwindling, and death. 6 stages of body for living entity. Then origin, how, when, and where the body is produced. Talks about the next 21, 22, multiple verses, span multiple verses. And then identity of the knower of the field of activity. Our identity, identity, living entity, the super soul, right? And the influence of the knower. So there's 5 different things or topics regarding Kshetra and Kshetrajna being mentioned by Krishna. Now, verse number 8 to 12, Krishna talks about Jnana. Answer to the 5th question. Remember, Jnana and Jnayam. Right? Jnana is knowledge. So Krishna mentions here the perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the super soul is known in terms of Vedic literature as Jnana. Kshetra, Kshetrajnayor, Jnanam, Yat Tak Jnanam. Kshetra, Kshetrajnayor. What is Jnana? Kshetra, Kshetrajnayor, Jnana. Knowledge of Kshetra, Kshetrajnayor, of Kshetrajna is Jnana. Okay, so one who understands both the soul and super soul as distinct as yet one, right, is called as is known as knowledge. That's Jnana. So, however, the real process of acquiring knowledge, so if you see 8 to 12 verses, you will say this Jnana, this I can see Amanitvam, Madam, Vitvam, Ahimsa, Shanta, Arjavam. All this looks like different, so to say, qualities or virtues, right? So the real process of acquiring knowledge is to cultivate saintly qualities, beginning with humility. Amanitvam. Srila Prabhupada, in the last paragraph of the purport of this particular verse, he mentioned the importance of humility. Very beautifully he mentions. Right? So Krishna basically in this 8 to 12 verse, Krishna mentions 20 different factors which help us attaining this knowledge, whereby the soul can attain liberation. So we need to develop these qualities to acquire knowledge. That is first. And it should be headed by humility. Humble like a bit of glass. Right? So, and Prabhupada stretches from this, of these 20 factors, one most important factor, the most important factor of this is Maicha Anya Yogera Bhaktir Abhyapicharini. The process of knowledge terminates in unalloyed devotion service to the Lord. So that process, that particular virtue of doing Abhyapicharini Bhakti, the Abhyapicharini has appeared before as well, in if not wrong, in Bhagavad Gita. So that particular Bhakti Abhyapicharini, that is the most important of the 20 factors Prabhupada mentioned in the purport. Now, along with that, there is one, if you see this particular verse, is the third one is Acharya Upasanam Shaucham. Acharya Upasanam. So mentions that is also very essential because transcendental life begins from an accepted bona fide spiritual master. And there's accepted Prabhupada, right, to all devotees. Now the next section is 13 to 19. Krishna talks about Nyaya, answer to the 6th question. What is object of knowledge? Right? So Krishna is called as the Pradhana Kshetrajna. The most important Kshetrajna, knower of the body. Right? So the object of knowledge is the soul as well as the super soul. Right? So Krishna explains goes on explaining the super soul and the soul and super soul, and he mentions around 17 different qualities of super soul. Right? His hands are like everywhere, and very similar verses mentioned in Ishopanishad as well. Hands are like everywhere. His eyes and heads are everywhere, all pervading, ears are everywhere, unattached. So many different qualities of the super soul I mentioned in verses 14 to 18. Right? Qualities of the categories of different qualities of super soul I mentioned. So basically, what is Nyaya, the object of knowledge, is soul and super soul. When you understand Sambandha, what is soul, the super soul, and the connection, the relation between these two. Right? So we understand who these two entities are. and the relation between them. So there's jnanam and nyayam, and which starts with humility. So the Lord has described in summary the body, the knowledge, and the knowable, the object of knowledge. And this knowledge is of three things: the knower, the knowable. The knower means Chaitanya, the knowable, the object of knowledge, and the process of knowing. Knower, knowable, and the process of knowing. And combine these three things are called Vijnana, the science of knowledge. Right? So in the next verse, Krishna talks about the 99th verse, Krishna talks about the qualification of understanding this knowledge. That is this section. Now this big section which is left is called the Prakriti and Purusha. Right? So there's answer to the first and second question. Prakriti and Purusham Chaiva. Right? So Krishna talks about what is Prakriti and Purusha. And Purusha is attributed not just, we know Krishna is Supreme Purusha, but Purusha is also assigned that what Purusha is assigned to the living entity, because even though we are Prakriti, we have a tendency to be Purusha, of enjoyer. Doesn't matter we are female body, male body, we are still Purushas, because we have tendency to enjoy, not over material nature. That's why called Purushas. So Krishna talks about how the living entity transmigrates. One of the most famous verses Prabhupada has quoted very often. Yes, Purusha Prakriti Stohi Bhumte Prakriti Jan Gunan Karanam Guna Sangosya Sadasat Yoni Janmasu. Yoni Janmasu, we are getting different material bodies based on what? Karanam. What is Karanam? Guna Sangasya. Because of association with material modes of nature, we are getting different bodies. Right? This section describes the union of Prakriti and Purusha. And I mentioned Prakriti can be the Lord as well as and can be living entity. But we know Lord is the Supreme Purusha. Right? So then Krishna talks about the location of super soul, and the Paramatma is the real Purusha. Krishna very clearly mentions about that. Then Sri Prabhupada very strongly emphasizes this process by saying that Lord Chaitanya himself stressed on the process of Shravanam. So if you see in verse number 24, Krishna talks about Shravanam. Sarvatha Vartamano, he talks about Shravanam, is very important. And Prabhupada, mentioned in the purport as well that Mahaprabhu also stressed on this particular aspect of Shravanam from bona fide authority sources. Now, the last section, at this point, all 6 questions have been answered. Now, next question is kind of the culmination, the amalgamation of all the previously mentioned knowledge in a nutshell. Krishna mentions. So it's called Jnana Chakshu, right? So how does it all come together? Right? Krishna offers the eyes of knowledge to Arjuna, where one can have a very holistic view of what's happening. Right? We have different ingredients. Prakriti is there, Purusha is there, all different 6 ingredients are mentioned, but you have to make one sabji. You have to make everything together. How do we look in a holistic, in a more whole fashion? That's what Krishna is giving here. So Krishna mentions that everything is a combination of matter and spirit. And Shri Baldev Vidyabhushan says that the Lord, controlling the Jiva and Prakriti, puts them in motion. And then Jiva Prakriti mutually binds them up. Krishna just puts them in motion and then leave it. And because of association, Karanam Guna Sangasya, we are bound. So in this way, Krishna very beautifully, because of lack of time, I won't go further, but in the next purport, the next verses, Krishna talks about how soul doesn't get engaged. He's not the actual doer. His soul is not the actual doer. Right? This soul always remains transcendental, doesn't get entangled and doesn't act. And knowing this, and the soul does not get contaminated by the qualities of the body, right? Even though this is in association with the body, soul does not get contaminated. It's always pure. Right? So one who understands this knowledge will get liberation. That is the Phala Shruti, the last words of this particular chapter. This chapter number 13. So the purport of 13th chapter is that one should know the distinction between the body, the knower of the owner of the body, and the super soul. One who can see the constitution of the whole material manifestation as the combination of the soul and material elements can also see the situation of super soul. And one should recognize the process of liberation. So this is the summary of the chapter number 13 as given by Prabhupada in the purport of the last particular verse. So I will stop here. Please forgive me if I made any mistakes. Please do correct me whenever I get time. Please do mention if I made any mistakes. I'm sure I did. So we'll stop here. Chapter 13 right now. We'll take a break because the darshan is open. Please, you can visit the Portland Temple and have darshan of Beloved Lordship, Shri Nitai Sachinandan, and then convene again at 2:30. So we'll continue again the 14th chapter from 2:30 and then we'll go till in 4:15, 4:30. So please to come back at 2:30 to hear the rest of the summarization of the chapters. Hare Krishna, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Gandhar Shri Bhagavad Gita ki jai.